At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we will cover all the home teams. We will talk about the New Orleans Saints. We'll talk about the LSU Tigers, the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Tulane Green Wave. And to break it down for us, one of my favorite guests, a guy that does it on radio, as part of CrestCitySports.com, and of course, a frequent guest on our program. Jude Young joins us on the program. Jude, welcome to the show.
It is a
How
pleasure.
are you?
Pleasure to be here as always, and I'm doing well. I can't complain.
Yeah.
Look, I know a lot of people have it tough right now in a lot of different ways, and we're all struggling at least a little bit, but I'm happy to be able to keep doing what I love, which is covering sports in New Orleans and Louisiana with CrescentCitySports.com. Fortunately, I can work from home and run our website and work with my partner Ken Trahan on that and keep the information and analysis flowing there, and we can also do our radio shows remotely when we need to, which is quite often these days, and we do that on 106.1 FM, 7 o'clock each weeknight, all access, either Ken or I on the air, just talking about what's going on and what we hope will be going on sooner than later. And this is the off season for me for broadcasting for UNO Athletics, although I'm doing some work on the side and some webinars with them and enjoying that with some great people from Privateer History, so that's kept me busy as well. Again, you can work from home, you can use Zoom. We're very fortunate for the technology we have in this day and age, for sure.
Well, it's kept us going, especially in the media. You know, you see how many TV stations now have their reporters either reporting from home. I mean, the entire sports departments are reporting from home now.
Right.
You know, they're doing their broadcasts from home. You know, again, I have the ability, as you do, to be able to broadcast my radio show on the road. I mean, that's where I've been on the road really since its inception. And you know, now I do that at home, so it's just as easy to be home. A little too comfortable being at home, where you can roll out of bed and start doing a radio show. But that's beside the point. And then of course, you know, we've tried to make it a point, as I've told the audience here before, to have some sense of normalcy on this show, to at least be in studio. We could have done Zoom, but we decided we wanted to go ahead and do studio, and I'm happy with the folks here at WLAE, of course, my director, William Hill, who really pushed for this to be able to have this sense of normalcy for us when we were broadcasting every week with a live broadcast with at least one guest. Eventually we'll get back to the two guests, which is with the format we started with. But you know, I think we've made the best of it in a lot of cases. From people in the media to, again, people in this country, you've had to be able to adjust on the fly here, and I think we've done that.
Right, as long as you're able to continue to communicate, and everything except for when you're actually on the air broadcasting, whether it's video or audio, is the same, putting that together. And because of the technological advantages we have to make that happen, and the fact that people that are watching and listening, they're used to those changes. They're used to understanding that it's not going to be perfect clarity when they watch an interview through Zoom. They're just very happy to have the information, to have the analysis, to have things to distract distract them from what's going on right now, and that's what sports is supposed to be. It's supposed to be entertaining in particular and a big distraction, and it's fun to be a part of that when people really need it right now.
Yeah, and of course, hopefully, again, very soon, the games will start again. And again, that's where, again, a lot of people are looking for that next step here. And look, by June the 26th, hopefully this state will be in phase 3. And that's going to be another big step for the state. And then, of course, what we'll talk about over the next hour is, again, the ability for, again, these teams to come back, get into some semblance of training camp, and get back on the field or on the court. So we're looking forward to that. Let's first of all, so with the time for the radio show, and once again, the position on the dial.
Right, Nash Icon 106.1 FM, 7 o'clock on weeknights, all access with Ken Trahan or yours truly.
There you go. And of course, CrescentEsports.com is where you can find all their work. NCAA made a big move now to get players back on the field. The council, again, yesterday approved a measure to conduct 8 hours of weight training, conditioning, and film review with not more than 2 hours of film review per week. That's going to be from July 13th through the 23rd. Then July 24th through August 6th, the school can conduct up to 20 hours of countable athletic-related activities for not more than 4 hours a day. Now, again, and this is how it breaks down, and then I want you to comment on if you would. Up to 8 hours per week for weight training and conditioning. Up to 6 hours per week for walkthroughs, which may include the use of a football. Up to 6 hours per week for meetings, which may include film, review, team meetings, position meetings, one-on-one meetings. And during these 14 days, student athletes are required to get at least 2 days off. And of course, that format for the practice, preseason practice, is going to be set to begin on August the 7th. That hasn't changed up to this point. And there'll be traditionally, the 25 on-field practices before they start the game now. I think that this is well thought out right now.
Right.
And I think this is a way to be able to make up for the lack of spring practice. Some schools are going to have a little bit of advantage because they had spring practice and they get this kind of a mini camp.
Correct.
To be able to get started again. But this is the restart of this, and it's going to help a lot of universities to be able to get back on track here and get ready for the upcoming football season.
Right. Most schools didn't have spring practice, and certainly down here that wasn't the case or very much of it. I know LSU got started briefly, but I think it's so important to understand that personal responsibility is going to tell the tale for a lot of teams this season, whether you're talking about competing at the very top of the polls and trying to make the college football playoff, or in conferences that aren't in the Power Fives, like Tulane and Louisiana Tech, ULL, you name it, because players are going to have to be taking care of their business as far as preparing and knowing the playbook, especially if they're newcomers, transfers, incoming freshmen. They're being given guidance to do that, and there's only so much contact to help them. The rest is up to them, and obviously being in the right kind of shape so that when you hit the ground running in August for preseason, that they're there. When normally a lot of the players can spend time throughout the whole summer being there at the facilities on campus to do that. So personal responsibility is going to be key, and if guys want to continue to compete and have jobs and they want to play professional football, they're going to do that. So the bright side is the NCAA is giving enough leeway and enough contact, and most importantly, guidance from the coaching staffs to be able to prepare these players to be able to come in for the preseason and make up for lost time when they're all together working in those key drills, 7-on-7, 11-on-11, obviously in the trenches, all that technique work that you simply can't get done like you would have in a normal calendar year.
No, I couldn't agree more. The other part of this kind of enhances what they've been doing in terms of classroom work, which is what you see in a lot of cases during spring. You'll see the on-field work, but you'll see the classroom work. They've been able to do this by Zoom.
Right.
So this enhances what they're doing now to kind of bring it all back, and then again, get on the field, do the walkthroughs, get a chance to be able to see a lot of the young players, how they're going to react to this. And look, especially for the local teams that have lost quarterbacks. This is huge now. LSU, Tulane, Nichols. We can go through a bunch of the other state universities that, again, are starting new quarterbacks or have a new quarterback room. This is going to help them as well, get them ready for the season.
Right. We don't know what Miles Brennan, of course, he has plenty of experience being on campus, a starter. Seems like eons ago, 3 years ago, at least briefly, but he's somebody who knows the system. There's no question about that. But having that chemistry with his wide receivers, we don't know if those guys are getting together on their own and what kind of work they're doing. We have no idea. But at Tulane, where there's less experience needs there as far as being in the program. Keon Howard, for example, somebody who may have to step in first. You don't know if he's getting with the receivers and getting that work in, that off-season 7-on-7 that is really easy to do, or just individually working on routes and things like that, with the passing game being so important. We simply don't know that. But the point is, yes, teams that have experienced quarterbacks that have a lot of experience coming back on either offense or defense, they're going to benefit from that, at least early in the season. And, you know, LSU lost a lot of talent to the NFL in particular, and they're still expected to be a top 10 caliber team. But yeah, there are going to be some real challenges there. But like you mentioned, the ability to be able to give them guidance from afar and be able to still send that information that they need. So players are already working with their tablets year round, having the video they need, understanding the playbook that way, so they can do a lot of that work on their own and be prepared for when they get out on the field and try to perfect their craft once they're there.
Yeah, I could agree more. And you mentioned, defense. LSU going with a new defense. The installation of that defense has been done obviously through Zoom, but now you get a chance to be hands-on, watching what these kids are doing, making sure they understand, because there's some position changes there as well on that defense. When you have the new defense coming in, so that'll be interesting to see. On the NFL side, Dr. Fauci has been out front for the country, kind of being the face of the coronavirus. Now, he came out with CNN within the last 2 days, and he warned that the NFL and college football season may not play this season if there's a second wave without players that are in a bubble, insulated from the public, and are tested daily. Now, again, I've been saying since the first lockdown came down, 30 days at a time.
Right.
We have no idea what's happening from 30 days on. The scientists have been wrong more than they've been right. I'm not going to fault the scientists here, because again, when you have an unknown like what you have, what they thought was a pandemic, in a lot of cases, you have to take the most drastic measures. And the most drastic measure is to shut down the economy and make people shelter in place. We'll find out over the next couple of months, again, if they were right or what they were wrong, based on, again, people getting out and about, from Memorial Day to July the 4th, the protests that we're seeing in the streets right now, again, the lack of social distancing there, the debate over whether you're going to wear a mask or not wear a mask, which continues, in our country. But you and I were talking before the show. I would not be surprised, based on what we are finding out over and over again, that, they were talking about, first they didn't think this came to the United States until January, but then now they're saying, well, maybe there could have been some cases in December in Florida. It would not shock me if, again, there were players that tested, if we would have had the COVID-19 test available, if there would have been players that would have tested positive in the NBA, in the NFL, in college football, college basketball, in the month of December, again, in the month of January, but before, again, we got to the point where, this became a crisis situation. I say this because there's been a lot of precautions from the NBA, using just, one basketball per player with the gloves for the plastic gloves for the coaches, to now, how do you play football with, multiple balls?
Right.
I mean, that's just, again, either you're going to play or you're not going to play. And I say this, again, not from any scientific background on that, but to say that we know what we don't know, and then we're finding out that, again, that this was in this country maybe a lot earlier than we thought it was, and there's a good possibility that a lot of people already had this early, and we just didn't know about it.
There's no doubt about that. It must be, at least in some way, because there were at least enough reports that I've read of unexplained people not testing for flu but having those flu-like symptoms. And we've also figured out that so many people are asymptomatic or mildly affected by this, particularly by age. The younger you are, the less likely you are to have these issues, particularly if you're under what I call AARP age. All of the numbers that have come out that actually break it down by age, in this country anyway, positives as opposed to people who have gotten hospitalized or unfortunately passed away, we can see by those numbers that, look, you're not really worried about the Ezekiel Elliott's of the world, top flight athletes getting ill from it, but you don't know if they have a relative at home, a child at home that has an immune deficiency, who's diabetic, for example. I was talking with William Hill, our producer, before the show, before you came out, and it was something that people don't report very much of, why people of color in some respects, based on studies of who've who've been affected so far. Why is that happening? Well, the reason why, in part, according to some studies, is that they're not getting enough vitamin D, because in the sun you get a lot of your source of vitamin D, unless you have to take a supplement because you have a shortage of that in your system overall and the way it's processed. Well, I don't get a lot of sun because I have sunburns. I've taken more vitamin D because I burn easily, and I simply can't be out in the sun without sunblock, and that defeats the purpose. We're not hearing about these things because I think we're getting reporting too much on the big picture and not understanding how it's affecting people. But you can be sure the NFL, MLB, NBA, soccer leagues, they are getting this information. They understand what they're dealing with, and it's more being able to protect the people who are at home. That's why you worry about Ezekiel Elliott passing it on to teammates and opponents. Just as an example, because he's the latest famous one, but anybody, because of who it could affect at home. Because that's why they're talking about isolating, and they are isolating NBA players in Orlando. They're going to isolate MLB players as far as travel and fans in the stands. But even then, you're going to have clubhouses with 26-plus players and coaches. And let's talk about coaches. Coaches are the ones that skew older. They're the greatest ones at risk on site of having something serious happen there. But at least they can wear masks and still do their jobs. You can't ask players to do that. In the NFL, you can come up with shielding, and I think you've seen these clear plastic shields that people can wear over their face rather than masks. They've become really popular. I think that you can have that, for example, with built into helmets, and I've seen some prototypes of that, and I'm sure the NFL is going to come up with something. But there's only so far you can go, and when we get into the fans and the stands aspect of things, there's a big difference in what a fan can wear, what you can ask a fan to wear in the heat of early September for a UTSA game at Tiger Stadium versus in a Superdome that's 68 degrees comfortable, and you can bear with it to be able to watch your team play.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Of course, again, a lot of this is going to have to do with testing. We see that the professional leagues obviously at least have a plan for testing. One of the things Dr. Fossey talked about, again, would be, isolated from the public, testing daily. One of the things I've talked about on the radio show over the last few days, based on what we've seen with the NBA, they've expanded the rosters now, 17, that includes two-way players. Most teams have two-way players that they have under contract that now will be with them in Orlando to play the games. The bringing back of the 10-man taxi squad, I think, is a way to be able to make sure and protect your team from an outbreak of COVID-19 or those testing positive. I don't think you can put it on a team to be able to have a situation where you've got 2-3 players that just that test positive, maybe going into game day, and then all of a sudden you're scrambling, and then you got to go to waivers to try to bring other players in, because again, we know that just the attrition of injuries through the season, where you may be. This may be the year that maybe they take a hard look at this roster, expand this roster, and different from maybe the practice squad, where again you have a lot of young players there. The taxi squad would give veterans jobs, okay, and that also would give a team like the New Orleans Saints, which has a very deep roster, the ability to hold on to some of these quality players that they have, instead of cutting them, going to other teams, having those guys on a taxi squad to be ready just in case players do test positive within their position group.
Right, whether you're a team as deep as the Saints, and we both talked about how they're as deep as it gets,
yes.
certainly in franchise history and possibly in the NFL. I think a lot of folks looking at it will say nobody's deeper than the expected 53-man roster the Saints have. But the things you can't control and why you need something, whether it's built into the practice squad and expanded, and the ability to activate them and shift them back more easily, or if it's some sort of taxi squad like years ago that was used, you don't know whether, not just people talk about, well, what happens if Drew Brees or Tom Brady gets it? I mean, that seriously affects the team because they have to be quarantined for 2 weeks. That seems to be the standard. But let's say it's not even that. What do you see on teams, just talking about football, as far as guys spending the most time together, intimately together? Offensive linemen stick together, wide receivers stick together, they're working together constantly. So chances are, if one guy gets it, he's probably passed it on to 2 or 3, and if that all tests positive at the same time, what is a team going to do?
No doubt.
Unfortunately, that's how the season could most likely be compromised in certain instances, and there's really nothing you can do about it, because the way I see it, you mentioned injuries. this has to be treated like just another form of injury and how it affects the team. It's luck of the draw. Who's going to twist an ankle? Who's going to tear ligaments? Who's going to have a positive test for coronavirus? Teams are just going to have to deal with it. And we already know whether it's physically there or not, the NBA season, the way it's going to be completed, is going to have an asterisk. If MLB can get their acts together and have a shortened season with the expanded playoffs we're hearing about, that's definitely going to be looked at as different and maybe less than the norm. In the NFL, hey, if there's an outbreak of that affects so many games, they're still going to play the games. They're still going to make that revenue. Players are going to get paid. Owners are going to make their money. We may not look at the 2020 season on par with other ones because of that if there are so many outbreaks that affect results of games, but they're still going to play on whether they use the ideas we're talking about or actually expand the physical 53-man roster if they decide they need to before the season.
I almost think they have to because you just mentioned it. If you get a player that tests positive, they can lose as many as 2 games.
Right.
You know, I mean, let's say that's your quarterback. You lose in 2 games here. If you're not really have a lot of depth at a certain position, and then the position group gets hit.
Because you can't have that depth. Most teams only carry 8 or 9 offensive linemen. Let's say 3 come up with it, like we saw when the Utah Jazz initially had the outbreak. It wasn't just Rudy Gobert; it was Donovan Mitchell and another teammate. That's 3 guys on an NBA team. 3 guys on any important cohesive unit can change everything for those 2 weeks that those guys have to be out. It's really hard to make up for that if you don't have people in the building that are working with your coaches that know your system, whether an expanded squad of one name or the other. If you don't have that, you can cost teams, and that leads to the domino effect not only of losing games, but seeing more players injured because guys don't know what they're doing or they're not good enough.
No, I agree. I think the NBA should be looking at the same thing. Not just, again, for the restart of the season, but when they start the season over again in December for next year. Again, the roster's at 17, having those two-way players. I think that, again, the teams that have a strong G League program will also benefit because you may have to go into a situation where you have to tap into your G League team to bring up players to be able to augment that roster if you've got 2, 3, 4 players that end up testing positive and are quarantined for 14 days. And when you say quarantine for 14 days, in the NBA, that could be 4 or 5 games.
Right, and when you talk about it happening in the playoffs, which will be here fast and at the end of August by the time they get the season started at the end of July, that compromises everything. And there's nothing you can do as far as depth of young talent and G League players to make up for if LeBron James or James Harden can't play. So I've wondered, and I haven't heard, and they have everything covered, the day-to-day with what's been released this week. What they haven't covered is, are they willing, if LeBron James and Anthony Davis both test positive at the same time, are they willing to stop the playoffs for 2 weeks and push everything back and then deal with the start of the next season, which is already going to be very much compressed and too close to, if they're doing it sometime in December like they seem to be planning, with a season that will have the finals at this point end in early October? Are they willing to push it back even more, not to further compromise the product this year? Because they're putting these playoff games on TV to make this money, but they're not the playoffs if the Lakers are in the Western Conference semifinals and they don't have LeBron James. It's not a valid product, and I haven't heard any plans as how they're going to handle it, but they really do have to stop if superstars are the ones who are affected. They really have to do it, and I haven't heard any plans to do so.
It'll be interesting to see again how the European leagues have handled this. I read something a while back that said there was a league that in Germany that were going to push through the positive test. They were going to, they were going to be in a bubble. If the teams got tested positive, they're going to push through, and they were going to play the games through. I don't know if that works out here in the United States, but ultimately I'd like to be able to see how that's going to play out, because I go back to what I said as we started the conversation. Again, based on what we're seeing now, there is a very good possibility that athletes were already COVID-19 positive, and we just didn't know it.
Right.
But yet again, the games went on, and again, there was no worrying about COVID-19 testing during the game. Before I want to ask you about baseball, but I want to talk just quickly about the NBA, and then I want to get a little depth in the NBA. Players that are opting out now for the possible restart of the season, or again, social issues. That is hitting the NBA right now. Do you think that will also affect Major League Baseball? That may affect the NFL as well, especially again if again the protest continue through the summer and into the fall. Do you think players will start not just opting out maybe for COVID-19, but also opting out for social issues as well?
I think what happened with what we heard about behind the scenes and talks with the NBA were pushed by one particular player who's a little bit out there when we talk about Kyrie Irving.
Yes.
I think he's very much in the small minority amongst NBA players that think it would be a good idea to lose your main platform to be able to talk about social issues by not playing.
Right.
So, and I don't think he was excited about coming back with a team that's waiting to get a healthy Kevin Durant back for next season too. So he wasn't thinking about the big picture like these teams that believe that they can win the NBA title do. So I don't think any of these leagues, it behooves the players in any of the major sports to step away from their main platform when the media, and including the sports media, is now free up to give them that platform that was being shut down when we look back to 4 or 5 years ago with the Colin Kaepernick situation.
Yes.
Networks and sports took a lot of heat for being too political. Now that, if you want to call it a Pandora's box, some people view it that way, that's wide open. So these players, if they're playing and they're grabbing the attention of fans around the country and around the world playing games, and they're going to have the best possible platform to talk about the social issues that mean the most to them. I can't see any player backing away from that opportunity, even when we talk about whether they think what we think, that these seasons, these championships to come, aren't as legitimate and maybe aren't as important as the big picture of people's health in this country.
Yes.
I don't think you pass up that platform, and I certainly don't think any of them in the end want to pass up making money that if you don't play, you don't make either.
Right.
And that, it does come down to dollars and cents in the end as well.
I agree about the platform. I think it would be foolish for players to step away when, again, they have that enhanced platform that's out there. And as I've said before on the radio show, you start your conversation or an interview. We've been in these locker rooms, and you say your piece about, again, whatever's on your mind. If it's about COVID-19, social issues, whatever it is, hey, as reporters, we're going to stand there and we're going to listen to it at least. Okay, and it's going to make its way either on social media or again on a broadcast.
Even then, they don't have to get their message across that way as much if they want to focus on the games and the teams and do it afterwards or on their days off. But some will, and that's fine. But when you're playing games and you have your sponsors buying ad time in games, the way corporate America's really embraced the movement, the anti-racism movement, players are going to be able to use that time because their corporate sponsors are going to want to use that time in order to talk about those issues, and those commercials are going to reach people. They're really going to be public service announcements that are going to get out the feelings and the needs and the beliefs of these players. You won't get that if you don't play games, or you won't get it to affect as many people if you don't play them.
I 100% agree, and I've said this before. The situation with Colin Kaepernick and then, of course, again, the subsequent kneeling 2 years ago during the national anthem, in a lot of cases, the NFL took the position they took because of corporate sponsors. Corporate sponsors were getting pressure from those that use their products. Subsequently, again, that pressure was being put on the NFL to be able to stop this. Ultimately, the NFL, worried about the bottom line, worried about their corporate sponsors, stepped in and stopped it, okay, and put an end to it. Now, again, as you mentioned, the mood of the country changing, we won't see that. You see those same corporate sponsors that were against that 2 years ago that are embracing it now.
Right. Until they get some sort of catchback that we're not seeing right now, there's no reason for them not to, because, hey, they're in the business of pleasing people. Whatever product you're selling, whatever service you're selling. So they're backing this because they see the mood of the country. And I don't know how it's going to affect the NFL with players kneeling. I think you're going to see whole teams kneel, personally, if they don't make a change that I don't think they're going to do, because it will upset more people than I think having the kneeling, which is to play the national anthem with the players not on the field, which is actually what happens in college football right now.
And it used to be that in the NFL.
Right.
People remember, again, I don't think it was until 9/11 when we started seeing the national anthem played with, again, the players on the field.
Right.
In a lot of cases, you have it maybe during the Super Bowl when they do the flyover. That was different. But most games, before the telecast came on, anthem was already done. Everything was finished at that point. You were ready to play the game. We could see that as well down the line here.
Right.
That could be something down the line. Although I don't think they're going to do that this year, because the pressure is on the NFL now based on what happened 2 years ago, that they're going to let things be status quo and they're going to let things go as they are and give the players the platform to be able to express themselves.
Honestly, I don't think they can ever do it, because that's become a part of the pregame ritual, which the NFL was taking advantage of to show it as the American game,
Yes.
the patriotic
Right.
league. Now you can't back away because of controversy. Even if you do it a year or two from now,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's going to notice it. They're just going to have to deal with how fans that decide they're not going to spend their money on the product
Mm-hmm.
anymore react if they see players kneeling and doing what they feel disrespects the flag. There are going to be people who react. We even saw it a few years ago when the initial controversy was happening. It did affect the ratings somewhat, according to the numbers.
No doubt.
It may wind up affecting folks being willing to buy tickets. Here, there's a long waiting list. In the end, if the Saints are good, the Dome's going to be packed. But in some cities, that's not going to be the case.
Well, and then again, we may be in a situation where stadiums won't be packed anyway.
Correct.
Where you're going to have to pick and choose who ultimately goes to the games, and through attrition, that may end up happening.
Right.
People saying, "Look, I'm not going as long as the players are kneeling." At that point, they're giving up their tickets, and that's more room for social distancing. At the end of the day, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Before we go to break, I do want to ask you about Major League Baseball, because that has been the most contentious sport up to this point in terms of the negotiations back and forth on whether they're going to play the game. What is the latest proposal, and do you believe that we will see a baseball season this year?
I think we will, because the cat and mouse that's been going on between two sides that don't trust each other at all, the worst relationship in sports as far as union versus management. I think they finally come together because finally MLB had to blink, because they were worried and they were being goaded into setting a season with a certain number of games based on prorated salary for the players that they were willing to pay out. They had a certain number of total salary dollars that they were going to pay out and no more. And what happened was the union called their bluff and said, go ahead, set the season. And MLB found out that they were immediately going to be sued. And if they didn't think they were going to be in trouble in court, they would have set the season anyway.
Yes.
Where they can get the extra income, according to reports, not only having an expanded postseason this year, which may be even more expanded than they were originally planning, could be 18 of the 30 teams this year, but next year as well, which is the final year of the current collective bargaining agreement. So both sides have their eyes on that and didn't want to give up any ground. It really looks like the players are going to win out or close to what they want here, because they're going to get their prorated full salary, and I think they're going to wind up playing at least around 65 games, maybe more, because they're going to have to meet in the middle somewhere, and that appears to be the reported middle at this point. If they wouldn't have taken so long to do this, they could have played more games.
Right.
Now they're going to have to get into another spring training of sorts in their home cities and get ready to play. That takes at least 3 weeks. And even then, you wonder if the pitchers are going to be, because of the work they need to do and the routine they're used to be ready to build up towards the season. I'm really worried about how that product's going to look. They're definitely going to have to expand their rosters.
What about the enhanced playoff format they're talking about?
Well, they're just talking about adding more teams. We've heard different proposals, but nothing that seems to be legitimately set here. They're going to have to figure that out based on the third party of these negotiations that doesn't get mentioned very much, and that's the networks. They're going to make their money off of the national contracts for postseason games.
Yes.
So how much do Fox and Turner, how many games do they really want come October? Because again, they are going to be at least bumping up to against early the end of the NBA playoffs. That's going to hurt them. And because of these seasons being pushed back, we know that the NFL and college football, they may be playing more games on off nights because of different issues. But in the end, I think they're going to get enough money so that the owners walk away covering their expenses and walk away with at least what they figure is a reasonable profit in a year. They're not going to make nearly as much as they're used to.
Jude Young is our guest tonight from CrescentCitySports.com. I'm your host, Eric Asher. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Let's hear from our underwriters. We'll be right back. We'll talk Pelicans, we'll talk Saints, we'll talk LSU and Tulane on the way back. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com is our guest. We talk Pelicans next. Pelicans 28-36, 10th in the West. They will be behind Portland and also Memphis in the playoffs. Again, trying to get to the at least the 9th seed or with a chance to be able to play for the 8th seed. Rosters, as I mentioned, are 17 players now with two two-way players that are going to be on the roster. There will be a training camp before the playoffs. We know now where the hotels are and, again, how they're going to set that up in Orlando. There'll be 8 games that are going to be leading up to that in which all teams will play. I got to say this again. Let me say this first. New Orleans, Portland, Sacramento, Phoenix, Washington, Orlando, and Memphis are the teams that are vying for that 8th spot in each conference. I love the Pelicans' chances here. A healthy team that, again, was playing very well. The only thing you worry about in my mind is the chemistry. Can you recapture that chemistry you had down the stretch? But you've got something that you haven't had all season long. Everyone healthy at one time on this team, and that includes Zion.
Right.
Remember, J.J. Redick was going out. You had problems with Derek Favors. So you don't know how you're going to be going to the playoffs. Now you're in a situation where everyone is healthy. Of course, you're playing other teams that are 100% healthy. But I like this roster and the way this roster is made up. I think they got a real shot to be able to get into that 8th seed.
No question. Even if they get into the 9th seed, that gives them an opportunity to potentially win 2 games to make it as the 8th seed in the actual playoff bracket. And the more games these Pelicans can play together, the better. If it's more than 8, they're only going to benefit even more from what will already be a real exciting stretch run, because they essentially just have to finish a game better than Portland. And I think they might have the tiebreaker over the Kings, if I'm not mistaken, because they have the same record. So they have to essentially match the Kings and be a game better than the Blazers to get to 9 and get a chance at Memphis. It's going to be hard to catch Memphis if they're competent. If they just go 500 in these games, it's going to be hard to then be able to surpass them. But to get 2 shots at them to potentially play likely the Lakers, that would be fantastic for this team. And it'll give the front office a chance and Alvin Gentry a chance to learn about how these guys really fit together when the chips are down. That was an opportunity that looked like it was going to be lost. Now they're going to have that chance. And like you mentioned, they're going to be fully healthy to do it. And they have such good depth that when they initially come back, hey, guys aren't going to necessarily be ready if you have to roll them out there for 40 minutes when you want to, your crunch time guys, and have Zion and Drew play those minutes. They might not be able to do that, but they have enough depth that they can really, I think, if they focus on the defensive end of the floor and be aggressive there and treat it like they're already in the playoffs and play to that level, you're going to learn a lot about these guys. And I agree with you. I really feel like they're more than good enough to get into the mix of 9. If they catch 8, that would be phenomenal, because that means they pretty much had to win out to get there. Portland's going to be tough too, though, because they had serious injuries throughout the year.
Nurkic is coming back.
Right. So this was a Western Conference Finals team that really took steps back. If they're focused, and we still don't know about that, because we know how Damian Lillard was acting throughout all this. If he's not fully into it, they're not going to succeed. And that's going to be the question about all these teams. Who's focused? Who's ready? Will these Pelicans take it seriously? I think they will, because we know Drew Holiday's a gamer, J.J. Redick's a professional, and you've got these guys that came over in the Laker trade along with Zion who have a lot to prove still. Anytime they have the spotlight, we're going to see the very best that they have, and I think it's going to be fun to see if they can gel and make that work together with the chips down.
You may see a Darius Miller come back, which will help you again in terms of of outside scoring. The sloppiness with the basketball was their Achilles heel all season long. When I talk chemistry, that's what I'm talking about. Again, turnovers crush this team. If you could get to a situation where you're not turning the ball over, where you're playing good, clean basketball, talent-wise, they can match up with anybody, again, that they're going in this little mini tournament with. And, of course, again, depending on what we're going to see, you're going to be playing a lot of those teams that you're going to have to be competing against for that 8th seed. And if you look at what they did during the regular season, they were better than those teams in a lot of cases. They had winning records against the teams they were competing against.
When you look at what David Griffin, what Trajan Langdon, what Swin Cash, and everybody in that front office that's going to be watching these games have to be thinking about, they're going to start wondering whether it's just the fit of the players together, if there's still sloppiness there, if there's still defensive breakdowns that are costly, or if it has something to do with coaching. They're going to have to figure that out. Just from the turnover perspective, you were throwing these players together. You're still trying to find out, can Lonzo Ball play with Drew Holiday heavy minutes? They both are better with the ball in their hands. Sure. Holiday, because he's not a great shooter off the ball, but we've at least seen Lonzo Ball show great progress as far as being a catch-and-shoot guy. So they should be able to figure out the spacing and the sets with the lineup combinations, because it really all starts with the backcourt. We'll see how that works out, because I'm curious. And yeah, Zion Williamson's still trying to find his way. 19 games as a pro. That's all he's played, although he's made a huge difference already. You know how good he can be. How will he fit in, at least now with another reboot, a mini training camp setting, that he's healthy and able to go through and be prepared for the season, having some games under his belt? That should help him, his teammates, the coaching staff fit him into the mix, and you should have a more efficient team on both ends of the floor. Again, these games are going to be huge for figuring out the future for these guys, and you want to ask them to take it seriously as can be, together with the opportunity, so you can figure out as a team, as an organization, what guys can fit together and what guys can't. And
the big plus is Zion has been in the facility throughout the COVID-19 shutdown. He's been working out. So again, it's not like a situation like Nico Melli, who's been stuck in his apartment or his condo in the warehouse district, where he hasn't touched a basketball in 3 months. This guy's been working out every day. So again, with the possibility of him gaining weight, everything else, he's been working out. So that's good. His basketball skills have continued to be honed. I love the fact that no matter what happens this season, this is an opportunity for them to have to play in meaningful games at the end, maybe in the playoffs. But then the December start, I think, is a great thing for the New Orleans franchise when it comes to the NBA, because again, it's less competition against football, and we know football is king in South Louisiana.
It should be a real plus for the NBA, and like you mentioned, particularly the Pelicans and other areas where football is king, to be able to start the season later. I think they would be best off if they made Christmas Day, when they play that 5 games in a row, make that the start of their season. I think that would be huge for them. They're so much better off competing on the back end with baseball during the summer than competing at the beginning for eyes. That, again, they have their fan base, but football is still king in America. I don't know if you saw the recent Gallup poll. That'd be 40% of people say that football's their favorite sport. Basketball's second at 11%. That tells you everything you need to know. So why compete with them where baseball's down to 8-9% right now?
Could you believe that 25 years ago, if that would have been the situation today, how baseball has really lost fans?
Right, and it's partially their fault, and I think it's partially demographics in our country. And the fact that in the end, basketball is the city game, and major cities, that's where the ratings come from, that's where the big bucks come from as far as sponsorship. So I'm not surprised about that, although baseball should be doing better, especially because of the Hispanic population and its outreach to Central and South America and the Caribbean. Baseball can blame itself for a lot as far as marketing individuals, whereas the NBA has done a brilliant job of that. So teams are a brand and players are a brand, and if you're the NBA and you're moving it, you're competing with baseball. You're getting away internationally from competing with soccer when you talk about the playoffs.
Right.
Soccer's off season is in the middle of the summer. That's when the NBA can move to have their playoffs. That's only going to be better for their product, and I think that's going to be a permanent move. I can't imagine it's not, because it makes too much sense from a dollars and cents perspective.
And especially when you look at the losses the NBA has had to deal with. Again, the loss of China in that market. Again, what has happened again, that was devastating for the NBA this year. Again, now again with the shortened season, everything you're seeing there, having to play enough games so the regional television contracts will kick in. Again, and then of course looking, one of the reasons why you've got to play, basically looking to the new CBA, again, you don't want to be in a situation where you're telling teams, you know what, everyone's over the cap, and they've got teams that, again, would never pay a luxury tax, and now in a position to play a luxury tax just to field a team. So again, that's another part of this as well going forward. So I think it's a great move for the NBA, and I'll be interested to see again if that becomes the permanent move going forward. I can't tell you how excited I am about the Saints team. And when I constantly look at that roster, and again, look, there weren't a lot of spots to begin with that are going to be open on this team.
Right.
But I got to give the pro personnel department a tremendous amount of credit on the players that they earmarked to be able to come here to fill positions, backup positions, or to be able to compete for starting positions. And then even though they didn't have a huge draft, again, laser focused on the players at the positions of need and getting those players in. Some of those players will, again, be guys that can make an instant impact this year. Some of them, because, again, where we are right now, may be a guy 1 or 2 years down the line that we see make an impact. But when you look at this roster top to bottom, as I look at other NFL rosters, this is as stacked of a roster of any roster in the NFL.
Right, and it's going to be so huge for them this year because of this offseason that wasn't. You're not having OTAs and mini camps, and for the teams that are experienced and teams that have depth and teams that have proven quantities and high numbers, it's really going to help, and that could wipe out the Saints' biggest issue in recent seasons, which have been slow starts in the regular season, whether it's because of how Sean Payton's handled training camp in the preseason, whatever you want to point to, the Saints should have a real advantage there, and if you can come out the gates, especially week 1, and put a loss on Tom Brady and Tampa Bay, that could be massive. But this is going to be a good team if they're not ravaged by injuries, COVID-19,
right.
whatever it could be, because we've seen them win 37 regular season games the past 3 years. And if anything, they're better and more equipped to keep that up. And yeah, it does take a little bit of good fortune, like Teddy Bridgewater being in, step in, maybe the right 5 opponents when you look at it. But you were still at Seattle. You were playing Dallas in prime time at home, a good football team. Those weren't fake wins. They're deep at the quarterback position again. They're deep everywhere. There's reason to believe this Saints team will again be a dominant regular season team. It's going to come down to January again and see exactly how far they can go.
I mean, you look at what they were able to do. I mean, you bring in Michael Burton, who again was brought in as your fullback. Swearinger comes back. You're able to go out and be able to bring in Jenkins, Sanders at the wide receiver position. You steal Ty Montgomery, who ultimately, again, can either be that third receiver for you, that fourth receiver, or a guy that can fill in if Alvin Kamara is injured. You need help along that offensive line. You need that swing player. You go out and get James Hurst. I mean, you need a backup quarterback. You go out and get Jameis Winston. I mean, every button they've pushed in the offseason, at least on paper, looks awesome for this team in terms of, again, having that quality depth. They go out and get Anthony Chickillo, again, who's a defensive linebacker, but also a guy that can play for you on special teams. I mean, I love what they've done in the offseason, not even talking about what they've done in the draft.
Right, and again, the draft, they were able to be aggressive, and really they were only planning on making, I think, the 3 picks in the end to address certain areas. They think Adam Troutman as a third-round pick is going to be somebody who's going to be a weapon when it counts by the end of the season, even though he played in FCS, and we'll have to learn a little bit, but he has the ability to be a complete tight end that you can play in rundowns, in line, or line him up outside and be another weapon, particularly Jared Cook, who didn't stay healthy all of last year. You need that as a staple in the offense. But first-round pick Cesar Ruiz, he's going to have to play.
Right.
They let Larry Warford. I think he's a center.
You think he's a center? You think they start him even without training camp, even without the off season and only doing Zoom, classroom type work? You think they put him in there and give him at least a shot?
Well, the real question is, I think they immediately put him in and see if he holds his ground against what's a good and deep defensive line. He's going to get tested in camp in the preseason because he's used to playing center. He played almost exclusively there at Michigan. They drafted him because of his intelligence. He was a first-round pick as a primary center. Eric McCoy wound up being a great pick as a second-rounder who's primarily a center, but physically has more skills and mobility and maybe more of a mauler that they can move him and fill Warford's old spot at right guard and get more out of them. And the fact that McCoy can help as somebody who's got a year under his belt having played center and help Ruiz along the way is probably easier than the reverse. I think that's going to wind up being the case, but Ruiz may flounder early on and not be ready for it. And the question is, will he be good enough at right guard when I think the target is him being the center?
Right. You look at Zach Bond, obviously they've got a vision for him. Yeah. He may be a guy that may be a situational pass rusher in the beginning, but eventually they want him to be able to play multiple spots along the linebacker position. To me, when you look at the depth at linebacker and then you look at the depth at the outside corner position, those are the two positions that maybe you can shore up. Especially, again, I think the cornerback position, because after Lattimore, after Janoris Jenkins, there's really not a guy on that team that can play the outside corner position. There are some good ones that are still out there. You look at Logan Ryan, you look at Kirkpatrick. Those are guys that could fit in here. $8 million under the cap right now. The Saints don't have money to spend this late. So I'm interested to see, again, how they fill those holes, or if they wait, get the training camp, and then decide then.
Right. We've never seen them have that amount of money and not spend it. They're not saving it for a rainy day during the season, even though some teams do that. The Saints don't. So you have to think they're going to attack those two areas. I think they can get affordable, a veteran linebacker help, somebody who can play at least at the linebacker spot, which is the weakest spot on the football team as far as health and experience right now. You can get away with playing two linebackers most downs, but not if you're playing for moving on, win or go home. When you play a team like the Vikings, you run across a team that's going to run the ball down your throat. You're going to need three linebackers on the field, and competent ones who can get the job done. So they're going to have to do something there, because you have to assume Zach Bond isn't going to be ready to be a contributor on a regular down basis at all this year. I think you have to assume that, because it's a huge transition from how he was used as an outside linebacker and an edge versus what his skill set says he can be one day. Kiko Alonso coming off a third ACL tear. Alex Anzalone, chronic shoulder issues. If they were healthy, you'd have no problems with Demario Davis as your third linebacker and Craig Robertson, who can fill in, but you don't want him being a starter. You don't want him being your number 2 linebacker with Davis. And what happens if Davis gets hurt? You better have another starting caliber veteran linebacker on that football team, not because it'll make you better with Davis. You can't really survive at that position without Davis if he were to go down.
That's right. And again, we got to also think COVID-19, right?
Right.
Possibility of maybe having to test positive, be out for a couple weeks. That's going to hurt him as well. No, I agree with you there. And, it's either feast or famine right now when you talk about the linebacker position. If Anzalone and Alonso are healthy, man, you're looking really good. Because, again, you're using 2 linebackers in a lot of cases. Again, but then as you mentioned, you play against a team that runs, you got to go with maybe a little heavier set.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see, again, how that plays out. But the one thing they don't have really is that guy that you can put on an island outside of Janoris Jenkins and Lattimore. And I think that's got to be a priority as they get a little bit closer.
Right, and that's much easier to handle if they're still available free agents to do that. Maybe they're just biding their time to get the right price, the right short-term contract, which would be smart when you're talking about somebody you're thinking of truly as a backup. Whereas linebacker, we've seen from the very beginning in the Sean Payton era that they'll make a trade in training camp if they need to. Scott Shanley wound up being a home run there. Yeah, and they've done that throughout the years. They don't value that position, although the best teams have been when they have a great lead linebacker in the middle of that defense, like Davis, like Jonathan Vilma, but they haven't really valued it because we've seen the league change. More and more passing means more and more DBs on the field and the need for fewer overall linebackers.
Yeah, let's head to the phone lines. Toby is in Gretna. Toby, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports. Toby with us? Okay, Toby is gone. Let's talk a little bit about LSU. Let's go to LSU. First of all, 14 players drafted, 6 undrafted free agents that are in the NFL right now. That's 20 players you have to replace off last year's team. Now, let me say this. They got an incredible freshman class coming in. Okay, an incredible freshman class coming in, and guys that have been kind of lying in wait, gotten some playing time. You got a change in the philosophy on the defensive side of the ball. Offensive stays the same, but you got to get it. No matter what, you got a brand new quarterback that's coming in.
Right.
Talk a little bit about the LSU Tigers and your anticipation of how they will look this season.
I think they're going to continue to be explosive on offense. They might not be all-world on offense, but they can still be explosive enough to be amongst the top teams in the country because Miles Brennan has a gun. He is going to have receivers starting with the best in the country in Jamar Chase to throw to, Terrace Marshall. You mentioned the freshman class and Eric Gilbert, the tight end. I think he's going to be a superstar-type player from everything we're hearing, who's going to see snaps and make plays as a true freshman. LSU doesn't have a shortage of weapons. They're now able to, with their offense and the way they're recruiting at the quarterback position, to now consistently tap into that talent, particularly at wide receiver. At running back, I know they really want to avoid having to go to a committee situation because they want to play fast. They want to have it so that they can keep the same personnel on the field for an entire drive and keep taking advantage of whatever mismatches are there. So we'll see what running back steps up. They have at least 4 options that are good enough, but they have different strengths and weaknesses. I don't think anybody nobody thought Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be the complete player that he wound up being in his final year at LSU. But again, the talent's there, and people who saw Edwards-Helaire do it in that locker room know that if they step up, they can become stars. They can even become first-round picks, so the motivation's there. It's more of a question on the defensive side of the ball because Bo Pelini knows what he's doing, and you're doing a major scheme switch.
Yes.
But I think it's a lot easier to switch from a 3-4 to a 4-3 if you feel like you have the horses up front to be able to do it. It's just an easier base scheme to work off of than a technical defense that Dave Aranda had out there that at times I think was a little too technical and had players on their heels. Now Tyler Shelvin, who is a good space eater, can attack, can blow through gaps and try to blow things up in the backfield. Maybe this defense can come up with more tackles behind the line of scrimmage and maybe wind up being more effective as far as delayed blitzes, stunts, things that you can do that maybe when you start with 4 down linemen and a lot of sets that you can benefit from. But they have enough experience there, I think, because they have a secondary led by Stingley. You can lock people down, okay? And even losing great talent like Delpit, great talent like Fulton, you still got numbers there that you should be able to roll out there and be aggressive. Pelini's going to want to play some man-to-man defense on the outside and come after people, and that's the easiest thing players can do. They can just use their athletic ability, be aggressive, and make things happen. And you have an offense that can make up for it if you make a mistake or two. But if you make a play or two, a big turnover, score points on defense, that makes your life a lot easier too. And I think that's what Ed Orgeron always wanted to get to, even though he inherited a really good defensive coordinator, now a head coach in Aranda. I think Bo Pelini fits his style, an old defensive lineman rolling 4D linemen out there.
No doubt. Now, talk about the Green Wave, because a lot of people believe, even with, again, the shutdown and not having the offseason, that Tulane was poised to make the next step this year under Willie Fritz. I am one. Now, again, the quarterback is still the biggest question mark there. What do you think about the Greenies?
Well, that's what it comes down to. If the next step to be made is not fighting to make sure you're bowl eligible, but really fighting to the end and seeing if you can make the conference championship game. In that league, so many teams that can flat out score, you've got to be able to have quarterback play that's consistent, that if a shootout breaks out, that you can match blow for blow. And there were times against a team like Memphis last year, they simply couldn't do it. So that's what I say. The recruiting is there for this team. Willie Fritz is being able to go across, particularly the South, not just get some talent from Louisiana, but go all the way across to Florida and tap into as many contacts from as many coaching stops with his staff. Look, they've got a good football team that can compete in that league, but it's the teams that have the best quarterback play and can be balanced on offense too. Championships are won in that league. Teams that can run the ball too, as well as consistently test you down the field, move the chains on 3rd down. I don't know if they have that at quarterback, and that could hold them back. I still think they're going to be a bowl team, but I can't say right now that I think they're going to be a team that's competing for the conference championship, and that's what Fritz said from the beginning of spring before it was cut short. That's what it's supposed to be all about at this juncture in his career with the Green Wave. I just don't know they're there until I see the quarterback play show that they're there.
Grad transfer, we keep hearing that that's something they're still looking at. You think it's still a possibility? We are so late in the game now for a grad transfer to come in and be able to take the reins for this team.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. Somebody can come in, but you can't expect big things. You're going to be learning on the job because they're coming in and they can't really do anything with the full team on the field until August. That's asking an awful lot, but they should look for somebody that's at least an insurance policy, hopefully somebody who's a gunslinger too, so that at the very least you might have an option when things aren't going well to say, hey, we need to put our quarterback in there and have him chuck it around a little bit and play hurry up and see what they can do to have a change of pace. They might be able to find something like that out there, but to ask for somebody to step in and make them a championship team in the American, no, you're not doing that at this juncture.
What about the transition for Ibieta, the kid from Country Day, to Tulane, and does he have an opportunity to see snaps as a freshman?
I think he's extremely talented. He's such an intelligent guy and an athlete who can do it. Sure, he needs to get into the weight room and put that weight on that you need to be able to withstand the pounding that you take as somebody who's willing to be mobile, who will run with the ball too. But he made a small school at Country Day that simply doesn't win in football. He made them be able to play with the best teams on their level in the state because he was so good they could put points on the board and match people and stay in games. His talent impressed me so much. I think LSU should have been heavily in on him, although he does have a bit of a family legacy at Tulane. Academics matter to his family. It's asking a lot as a true freshman, especially again this offseason. I'd be really surprised if he gets the chance, but if he does, it might be the best thing for Tulane's future 2021 and beyond.
Jude Young, as always, thanks so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
That is Jude Young, CrescentCitySports.com, and also the radio show is
All Access, 106.1 FM.
And of course, you catch them 7 o'clock weekdays on 106.1. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV. Also, you can catch on Pelican Sports Television. That is Friday nights at 9 p.m. You catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2 and the iHeart Radio app. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. All the previous episodes are available at ericasher.com. And of course, you can go to our WLAE YouTube page to check out all the previous episodes of this program. And we post it on our social media pages as well. I want to thank our fantastic underwriters. Each and every one of them make this show possible. Please support those underwriters. Thanks to Jude Young also for joining us on the program. Also to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Tommy Fairley, Naila Jones, Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll check you out for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports this next week. Until then, have a great week.